They thought he was just a homeless nuisance taking up space in booth 4. For 3 years, the staff at the Silver Fork Diner ignored him, mocked him, or tried to kick him out. Everyone except Eleanor. She refilled his coffee when he couldn't pay. She shielded him from the manager's cruelty. She treated him like a human being when the world treated him like trash. Elena thought she was just being kind to a lonely old man. She had no idea that the man in the tattered coat was sitting on a secret worth billions. And she definitely didn't know that the 4 men in black suits walking through the door weren't there to arrest him. They were there to take orders from him. And today, heads were going to roll. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it felt like it was trying to erase the city, grey layer by grey layer. Inside the Silver Fork, a diner that had seen its prime somewhere around 1985, the smell of stale fryer grease and burnt coffee clung to the vinyl seats. Elena adjusted her apron, wincing as the knot dug into her lower back. It was 5:45 a.m. Her shift had started at 4, but her day had started at 2 when her younger brother, Toby, had woken up coughing with another asthma attack. The nebulizer was broken, the rent was 3 weeks late, and her bank account balance was currently sitting at negative $12. She picked up the coffee pot, her hand trembling slightly from exhaustion. She took a deep breath, plastered on the customer service smile that she used as armor, and walked toward booth 4. He was there, just like he was every single morning. Arthur. He looked like a tragedy carved out of bone and old skin. He wore a tweed coat that was missing 3 buttons and smelled faintly of mothballs and damp wool. His hands, resting on the sticky table, were shaking. To anyone else, Arthur looked like a vagrant, a man who had slipped through the cracks of society and landed in the back corner of a failing diner. "Good morning, Arthur," Elena said, her voice soft. She didn't use the waitress voice she reserved for the business tycoons who came in for power breakfasts. She spoke to him like he was her grandfather. "The usual." Arthur looked up. His eyes were a milky blue, clouded by cataracts and age, but there was a sharpness behind them that most people missed. He nodded slowly. "Please, Elena, if it's not too much trouble." "Never trouble, Arthur. Dry wheat toast, 2 poached eggs, soft, and black coffee. And tell Rick I'll pay for yesterday's coffee today," Arthur mumbled, looking down at his hands. "My check. It's late." Elena's heart squeezed. She knew Rick, the diner's manager, wouldn't care about a late government check. Rick cared about turnover rates and profit margins. "Don't worry about it," Elena lied effortlessly. "The machine was acting up yesterday anyway. Consider it on the house." She poured the coffee. Steam rose up between them, a temporary shield against the cold reality of the morning. "You're a good girl, Elena," Arthur whispered, wrapping his cold fingers around the warm mug. "Too good for this place." "We do what we have to do, Arthur," she replied, checking over her shoulder to make sure Rick wasn't watching. Rick was watching. Rick distinctively looked like a man who had peaked in high school football and was angry about it every day since. He stood near the cash register, his arms crossed over a chest that strained the buttons of his polyester shirt. He was staring at booth 4 with pure disdain. Elena hurried back to the service station, punching in Arthur's order. She pulled a $5 bill from her own tip jar, money she desperately needed for Toby's medicine, and slipped it into the register to cover Arthur's tab. "What are you doing?" Rick's voice was like a cheese grater against her ear. He loomed over her, smelling of cheap cologne and cigarettes. "Putting in an order, Rick," Elena said, keeping her eyes on the screen. "For the bum?" Rick sneered. "Elena, I told you, we aren't a charity. He sits there for 2 hours, buys $3 worth of food, and scares away the real customers. Look at him. He looks like a corpse." "He's a paying customer," Elena shot back, her voice low. "And he's harmless. He's 80 years old, Rick. Where is he supposed to go in this rain?" "Not my problem," Rick snapped. "I'm trying to rebrand this place. We've got the new condo development opening across the street next month. I want tech guys, Elena. I want Amazon money. I want Microsoft money. I don't want that." He gestured vaguely at Arthur. "If he can't pay for the meal up front, kick him out." "He paid," Elena lied again. "It's in the register." Rick narrowed his eyes at her. "You're paying for him again, aren't you? You're pathetic. You can barely afford your own rent, and you're feeding stray dogs." Elena gripped the counter edge until her knuckles turned white. "Is the order going in or not?" "Rick?" Rick laughed, a cruel, short bark. "Fine. Feed him. But mark my words, Elena. Changes are coming. And if you keep anchoring yourself to dead weight, you're going to drown with him." 2 weeks passed, and the rain in Seattle turned into a biting frost. The atmosphere inside the Silver Fork grew equally frigid. Rick was on a warpath. The owner of the building, a faceless entity known as Vanguard Properties, had been putting pressure on the diner to increase revenue or face lease termination. Rick, in his panic, had decided that the best way to save the business was to purge it of anything undesirable. That meant Arthur. It was a Tuesday, usually a slow day. Elena was rushing between tables. She had just received a text message from her landlord. "Eviction notice filed. You have 3 days to pay the arrears, or the sheriff comes Monday." The phone felt like a hot coal in her pocket. She felt sick, nauseous. The world was spinning slightly. She walked over to booth 4 to refill Arthur's coffee. He looked worse than usual today. His skin was grey, papery, and thin. He was coughing into a handkerchief. "Arthur, you sound terrible," Elena said, concern cutting through her own panic. "Do you need a doctor? I can call the clinic on 4th Street. "No doctors," Arthur wheezed. "Just old age, my dear. The engine is rusting out." He looked up at her, and his gaze fixed on her neck. "You aren't wearing it." Elena touched her collarbone. "Wearing what?" "Your mother's locket, the silver one. You rub it when you're stressed. You're rubbing your neck, but the locket is gone." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She bit her lip, looking away. I had to pawn it, Arthur." "Pawn it?" The old man's voice dropped an octave. It wasn't weak anymore. It sounded stern. "Why?" "Toby needed antibiotics, and the heating bill came in. It's fine. I'll get it back when I get paid on Friday." It was a lie. The pawn shop interest was 20%. She would never get it back. It was gone, just like her parents, just like her dreams of going to nursing school. Arthur stared at her for a long time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. He wrote something down with a shaking hand. "How much?" Arthur asked. "Arthur, please," Elena sighed, pouring the coffee. "Drink your coffee." "How much, Elena?" $200, she whispered, ashamed. Arthur closed his eyes. He looked defeated. I wish I could help you. I truly do." "You listening to me is help enough," she said, squeezing his shoulder. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed through the diner. Rick had dropped a metal tray on the counter, signaling for attention. He marched out from behind the bar, followed by 2 men in suits. They weren't customers. They were consultants Rick had hired to optimize the floor plan. "This is the problem area right here," Rick said loudly, pointing a thick finger directly at booth 4. Elena froze. The few other customers in the diner looked up. "Rick, don't!" Elena said, stepping between the manager and the table. "Move, Elena," Rick snarled. He looked at the consultants. "This booth has the best view of the street. It's prime real estate. But we can't seat premium clients here because we have a squatter. Rick slammed his hand down on Arthur's table. The coffee cup rattled, spilling hot liquid onto Arthur's frayed sleeve. Arthur flinched, but he didn't say a word. He just wiped the coffee away with a napkin, his dignity intact, despite the humiliation. "Hey!" Elena shouted, pushing Rick's arm away. "You burned him. What is wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me is that I'm trying to run a business," Rick yelled, his face turning beet red. "I'm done, Elena. I am done with the charity case. Get him out." "He hasn't finished his meal," Elena said, her voice shaking but firm. "I don't care. He smells like a wet dog and he's bad for the brand." Rick turned to Arthur. "Get up, old man. You're barred. Don't come back. If I see you here tomorrow, I'm calling the police for trespassing." Arthur slowly placed his napkin on the table. He looked at Rick, not with fear, but with a strange, detached curiosity. "You are making a mistake, young man. A very expensive mistake." Rick laughed. "Is that a threat? What are you going to do? Bleed on me? Get out!" Eleanor grabbed Arthur's arm gently. "I'll walk you out, Arthur. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." "You don't have to leave, Elena," Rick said, crossing his arms. "You still have a shift to finish. Unless you want to join him on the street?" It was the ultimate leverage. Rick knew about the eviction notice. He knew about Toby. He knew Elena was trapped. Elena looked at Arthur. The old man's eyes were soft. "Stay, child," Arthur whispered. "Don't lose your livelihood for me. I'll be fine." "I can't let him talk to you like that," she cried. "It's just words," Arthur said, standing up. He was taller than he looked when seated, though his back was hunched. He reached into his pocket and placed a single, crumpled $1 bill on the table as a tip. It was likely the last dollar he had. "Thank you for the eggs, Elena." He walked toward the door, his limp pronounced. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as he exited into the pouring rain. Rick smirked, dusting off his hands. "Finally. Now, Elena, clean up that table and bleach the seat. I want that old man smell gone before the lunch rush." Elena stared at the door. Her heart was pounding in her ears. She felt a deep, dark rage building in her chest, but fear clamped it down. She needed the money. She picked up the spray bottle and the rag. As she wiped down the table where Arthur had sat for 3 years, she noticed something. He had left his notebook. She picked it up. It was a cheap, spiral-bound thing. She opened it, intending to run out and give it to him. The pages weren't filled with ramblings of a senile man. They were filled with numbers, complex equations, stock tickers, real estate zoning codes. And on the last page, written in shaky cursive, was a list of names. 1. The rude banker on 5th. 2. The lady who kicked my dog. 3. Rick, manager. Next to Rick's name, he had just written one word: liquidation. Elena frowned. It didn't make sense. She shoved the notebook into her apron pocket, intending to return it the next day. She didn't know it then, but she was holding the detonator to a nuclear bomb that was about to go off in the center of her life. Wednesday morning arrived with a silence that was louder than any noise. The rain had stopped, replaced by a dense, suffocating fog that rolled off Puget Sound and choked the streets of Seattle. Inside the Silver Fork, the silence was concentrated in booth 4. Elena moved through her shift like a ghost. Every time the door chime rang, her head snapped up, hoping to see the familiar tweed coat and the shuffle of Arthur's worn-out shoes. But it was never him. It was construction workers, tired nurses, or the occasional lost tourist. "He's not coming back, Eleanor," Rick said, passing by her with a pot of coffee. He sounded cheerful, almost giddy. "And look, the air smells better already. I told you he was driving away business. I bet we hit a record lunch today." Elena didn't respond. She couldn't. The knot of anxiety in her stomach had tightened into a hard stone. She had checked the notebook again during her break. The handwriting was erratic, but the details were terrifyingly specific. There were dates, stock prices, and notes on Vanguard Properties, the company that owned the diner's building. Why would a homeless man care about corporate property acquisitions, she wondered. Maybe he was delusional. Maybe he used to be an accountant before life broke him. The thought made her sadder. Her shift ended at 2:00 p.m. She grabbed her coat, dreading the walk home. She had $12 in tips in her pocket. It wasn't enough for Toby's medicine. It wasn't enough for anything. When she turned the corner onto her street, her heart stopped. A squad car was parked in front of her apartment complex. 2 men in uniforms were standing on the sidewalk. Beside them, sitting on the wet pavement, were 3 cardboard boxes and a plastic garbage bag stuffed with clothes. And Toby. Her 10-year-old brother was sitting on one of the boxes, his inhaler clutched in his hand, shivering in the damp air. "No," Elena whispered. She broke into a run. "No, no, no!" "Elena!" Toby cried out when he saw her, his face streaked with tears. She skidded to a halt in front of the officers. "What is this? What are you doing?" "Ma'am, are you Elena Vance?" the older officer asked, his face sympathetic but firm. "Yes." "Why is my brother on the street?" "Eviction order was executed at noon, Miss Vance. The landlord let us in. We gave you the grace period. Locks have been changed." "But I have until Friday," Elena lied, desperation clawing at her throat. "He said I had until Friday." "Paperwork says today, ma'am. I'm sorry. You can't go back in." The officer handed her a piece of yellow paper. Elena stared at it, the words swimming before her eyes. Writ of possession. Immediate effect. She looked at the small pile of their belongings. It wasn't everything. It was just what the landlord had bothered to throw out. Her mother's photo albums, Toby's school books, their warm winter coats. Everything else was locked inside, held hostage until she paid a debt she couldn't afford. "Where are we supposed to go?" she choked out, wrapping her arms around Toby. "There's a shelter on First Avenue," the officer suggested gently. "They take families." Eleanor nodded numbly. She knew the shelter on First Avenue. It was dangerous, loud, and terrified Toby. But they had no choice. That night was the longest of Eleanor's life. They didn't go to the shelter. Instead, they spent the night in the 24-hour laundromat 3 blocks away, pretending to do laundry. Eleanor bought Toby a vending machine sandwich with her tip money and held him while he slept on a row of plastic chairs. She didn't sleep. She stared at the spinning drums of the washing machines, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights. She felt a profound, hollow emptiness. She had done everything right. She worked hard. She was kind. She followed the rules. And yet, here she was, homeless, watching her sick brother sleep in a laundromat, while men like Rick slept in warm beds. She touched her pocket, feeling the outline of Arthur's notebook. I failed, she thought. I failed Toby. I failed myself. And I couldn't even save Arthur. Thursday morning. Waitress. M. Elena walked into the Silver Fork wearing the same clothes she had worn the day before. She had washed her face in the diner's bathroom sink and tried to smooth out her wrinkles, but she looked like a wreck. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She had dropped Toby off at a friend's house before school, a temporary favor she knew she couldn't ask for often. She was technically homeless. "You're late," Rick barked as she tied her apron. He didn't ask why she looked like she had been hit by a truck. He was too busy adjusting a new sign in the window, now under new management. Premium coffee served here. "Sorry, Rick," Elena mumbled. "Won't happen again." "Better not. We have a big day." I have a meeting with the Vanguard Properties rep at 9 a.m. They're finally sending someone down to discuss the lease renewal. I need this place spotless. If you mess this up, Elena, you're out. I mean it." Elena nodded. She moved to booth 4. It was empty. She felt a phantom pain in her chest. She cleaned it anyway, out of habit. The morning rush began. It was the usual chaos, but Eleanor moved through it on autopilot. Her body was there, pouring coffee and flipping pancakes, but her mind was calculating how many shifts she needed to pick up to afford a motel room for the night. At 8:55 a.m., the atmosphere in the diner changed. It wasn't a sound. It was a vibration. The low, guttural hum of powerful engines. The few customers eating their eggs looked out the window. Rick stopped wiping the counter. Outside, in the grey drizzle, a convoy of 3 black Cadillac Escalades had pulled up to the curb. They were sleek, massive, and menacing, taking up the entire loading zone. They looked like government vehicles, or the kind of transport reserved for heads of state. "Whoa," a customer whispered. "Is that the president?" Rick's eyes went wide. He frantically smoothed his hair and tucked in his shirt. "That's them. That's Vanguard. I told you they were big money. Elena, get the best table ready. Booth 1, move." The doors of the SUVs opened in perfect synchronization. First, the bodyguards stepped out. 4 of them. They were mountains of men, wearing tailored black suits that strained against their muscles. They wore earpieces and dark sunglasses, despite the rain. They didn't look like real estate agents. They looked like the Secret Service. 2 of them took positions by the diner door. The other 2 scanned the street with professional paranoia before opening the back door of the middle vehicle. Rick was practically hyperventilating. "Oh my God, this is it. Elena, stand up straight." The door to the diner swung open. The chime jingled, sounding absurdly cheerful for the gravity of the moment. 2 men walked in. They were not bodyguards. They were lawyers. You could tell by the cut of their suits, Italian wool, sharp enough to cut glass, and the leather briefcases handcuffed to their wrists. One was older, with silver hair and a face like a hawk. The other was younger, typing furiously on a tablet. The diner fell dead silent. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The fry cook turned off the grill fan to listen. Rick rushed forward, his hand extended, a desperate, oily smile plastered on his face. "Gentlemen, welcome to the Silver Fork. I'm Rick, the manager. I assume you're here from Vanguard Properties? Please, right this way. I have a booth prep." The silver-haired lawyer didn't even look at Rick's hand. He stopped in the center of the room and scanned the diner with a look of clinical detachment. "I am Archibald Henderson, senior partner at Henderson, Finch and Associates," the man said. His voice was calm, deep, and carried the kind of authority that made you want to apologize for existing. "We represent the majority shareholder of the Vanguard Group." Rick's smile faltered. "Oh, wow. The majority shareholder? That's incredible. Well, as you can see, we run a tight ship here. I've been making some great changes to the demographic." "We aren't here for the lease, Rick," Mr. Henderson said, cutting him off. He didn't call him Sir or Mr. Manager. He just used his first name, stripping him of all authority. Rick blinked. You aren't?" "No." Mr. Henderson turned his head, his eyes locking onto Elena, who was freezing by the coffee station. "We are here for her." Rick turned to look at Elena, confused. "Elena? The waitress?" "Ms. Elena Vance," Henderson said, consulting a file in his hand. "Waitress. Nursing student dropout due to financial hardship. Current resident of nowhere as of yesterday's eviction." Elena gasped. The blood drained from her face. "How did they know?" "Is there a problem?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. I didn't steal anything, I promise." Mr. Henderson's expression softened, just a fraction. "No, Miss Vance, you are not in trouble. Quite the opposite." He turned back to the door and nodded to the bodyguards. "Our client would like to have breakfast," Henderson announced to the room. "The usual, please. Dry wheat toast, 2 poached eggs, soft." Elena dropped the coffee pot. It shattered on the floor, sending hot liquid and glass everywhere. No one moved to clean it up. From the middle SUV, a figure emerged. He wasn't wearing the tattered tweed coat anymore. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that likely cost more than the diner's entire annual revenue. He had a cashmere scarf draped around his neck and a cane with a silver handle shaped like a lion's head. He moved with the same limp, the same hunched shoulders, but the air around him was different. It wasn't the air of a victim. It was the air of a king. Arthur walked into the diner. The silence was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Rick's jaw actually dropped. "The bum?" he whispered, his brain unable to process the visual data. "That's the bum." Arthur ignored Rick completely. He walked past the stunned customers, past the stunned lawyers, and stopped in front of Eleanor. He looked healthy. Someone had shaved him, trimmed his hair, and the fog in his eyes seemed to have cleared. He looked like the powerful man he must have been 30 years ago. "Hello, Elena," Arthur said. His voice was stronger now, bolstered by confidence and rest. "Arthur?" Elena whispered, tears spilling over her cheeks. You're cleaned up nicely, didn't I?" He smiled, a genuine warm smile. "But who are you?" Arthur chuckled. He gestured to the lawyers. "Mr. Henderson, would you make the introductions?" Mr. Henderson stepped forward. "Ms. Vance, Rick, may I introduce Mr. Arthur Sterling, founder of Sterling Industries, owner of the Vanguard Group, and the sole proprietor of the real estate portfolio that includes this city block, 3 skyscrapers downtown. And," he paused, looking around the diner with disdain, "this establishment." Rick made a noise that sounded like a dying balloon. You own the building." Arthur finally turned to look at Rick. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by the cold, hard steel of a titan of industry. "I own the block, Rick," Arthur said softly. "I bought this building in 1978. I built my empire on deals made in diners just like this one. When my wife passed away 4 years ago, I lost my way. I wanted to see if there was any humanity left in the city I helped build. I decided to live simply, to see who people truly were when they thought no one was watching." Arthur took a step closer to Rick. The bodyguards took a step closer to Arthur. "I spent 3 years sitting in booth 4, Arthur continued. "I watched you cheat your employees on overtime. I watched you water down the ketchup. I watched you treat people with less fortune than you like garbage." Rick was sweating profusely now. "Sir, Mr. Sterling, please, it was just business. I didn't know." "Character isn't what you do when the boss is watching, Rick," Arthur snapped. "Character is what you do when the bum is watching." Arthur turned back to Eleanor. The warmth returned. "And you, my dear, you fed me when I had nothing. You defended me when I was weak. You sacrificed your own livelihood to protect a stranger." Arthur reached out and took Elena's hand. "Mr. Henderson?" Arthur said. "Yes, sir." The lawyer stepped forward with a document. "Elena," Arthur said, "I told you that you were making a mistake by investing in dead weight. But the best investments are the ones made with the heart." "I don't understand," Elena sobbed. "Rick," Arthur said, not looking at him, "you're fired. Get out of my diner." Rick blinked. "What? You can't— I have a contract." "Mr. Henderson?" The contract has a morality clause, Rick, Henderson said smoothly, and we have ample video evidence of harassment. The bodyguards will escort you out. You have 2 minutes to collect your personal items. 2 of the massive men stepped forward. Rick looked from them to Arthur, realized he was utterly defeated, and bolted for the back office. Elena, Arthur said, looking her in the eyes, I'm not just firing him. I'm replacing him. He took the document from the lawyer and placed it in Elena's shaking hands. I'm giving you the diner, Arthur said. Elena froze. What? The deed to the building, the business license. It's all in your name. You are the owner of the Silver Fork, effective immediately. Arthur, I can't. I don't know how to run a business, and I'm homeless. I can't accept this. Arthur smiled. Read the second page. Elena flipped the page. In addition to the transfer of business assets, a trust fund has been established for the education and medical expenses of Toby Vance. Initial deposit, $5,000. Elena's knees gave out. She would have fallen if one of the bodyguards hadn't gently caught her arm. Why? She wept. Why would you do this? Arthur leaned in close, his voice a whisper that only she could hear. Because, Elena, that coffee was terrible, but the company was priceless. The first month of Elena's new life felt less like a dream and more like a hallucination. She and Toby had moved into a modest, clean 2-bedroom apartment in Queen Anne. It had heating that actually worked, a fridge stocked with fresh vegetables, and, most importantly, a nebulizer that didn't rattle like a dying engine. Toby was enrolled in a private school that specialized in respiratory health management. The trust fund Arthur had set up ensured that for the first time in her life, Eleanor didn't have to choose between electricity and food. But at the Silver Fork, the fairy tale was fraying at the edges. Arthur had left the city shortly after the transfer. Business in Zurich, Mr. Henderson had explained vaguely, leaving Elena with a team of consultants and the keys to the diner. Elena stood in the manager's office, formerly Rick's domain. It still smelled faintly of his cheap cologne and desperation. She looked at the stack of invoices on the desk. Being a waitress was hard physical labor. Being an owner was a mental siege. Excuse me, boss. Elena looked up. Standing in the doorway was Brenda, a waitress who had worked there for 10 years. Brenda had always been Rick's favorite. She was the one who used to accidentally spill water near Arthur's booth to make the floor slippery, hoping he'd fall. Yes, Brenda? Elena asked, straightening her spine. The cook walked out, Brenda said, popping a bubble of gum. She didn't look concerned. She looked smug. Said he doesn't take orders from a girl who was wiping tables last week. Elena stood up. Which cook? Marco? Yep. And the dishwasher is threatening to quit too. They say the pay isn't reliable anymore now that Rick is gone. Elena narrowed her eyes. She knew exactly what was happening. Rick might be physically gone, but his poison was still circulating in the bloodstream of the diner. He was texting them. She had seen Brenda on her phone constantly. Tell Marco that if he walks out during a shift, he's forfeiting his severance, Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady. And tell the dishwasher that I'm raising the hourly wage by $2 effective immediately. If they stay, they get a raise. If they leave, they get nothing. Brenda blinked, the gum freezing mid-chew. You can't just give raises. I own the building, Brenda. I can do whatever I want. Now get back on the floor. Table 6 needs water. Brenda turned on her heel, her face sour. Eleanor slumped back into the chair. Her hands were shaking. She felt like a child wearing her mother's high heels. She wasn't a businesswoman. She was just Eleanor. She opened the bottom drawer of the desk, looking for a pen. Instead, her hand brushed against a false bottom in the drawer. It was loose. Curious, Elena pried it open with a letter opener. Inside was not a ledger, but a stash of envelopes, thick, manila envelopes. She opened one. It was filled with cash, thousands of dollars. She opened another. Photographs. They were photos of prominent city officials, a councilman, a health inspector, a police lieutenant, all in compromising situations. Some were eating at the diner with women who were definitely not their wives. Others were accepting envelopes from Rick. Elena's blood ran cold. Rick wasn't just a bad manager. He wasn't just skimming off the top. The Silver Fork wasn't just a diner. It was a hub, a safe zone for low-level corruption. Rick bought protection by letting important people do bad things in his booths, and he kept records of it all. Arthur had seen Rick's cruelty, but he hadn't seen this. Arthur had given her a gold mine, but Rick had left a landmine buried underneath it. Before she could process what she was seeing, her phone buzzed. It was a notification from a local news app. Breaking. Cinderella. Waitress accused of elder abuse. Disgraced manager claims billionaire was medically incompetent when signing over assets. Elena dropped the phone. The screen cracked. The attack didn't come with lawyers in suits this time. It came with cameras. By the time Elena got to the front of the diner, 3 news vans were double-parked outside. A reporter was standing in the rain, gesturing dramatically at the diner's neon sign. And there was Rick. He looked different. He was wearing a sympathetic beige cardigan and glasses he didn't need. He looked humble. He looked like a victim. "I just wanted to protect Mr. Sterling," Rick was saying to a camera, wiping a fake tear from his eye. "Elena, she's a sweet girl, but she's manipulative. She saw a sick, confused old man, and she preyed on him. She isolated him. She fed him substances. I tried to stop it. That's why she had me fired. And now? Now she controls a $50 million asset. Does that sound like justice to you?" Elena watched through the blinds, horrified. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. The door to the diner burst open. It wasn't customers. It was the health department. "Health inspection," a man in a windbreaker announced loudly. He wasn't the usual inspector. He was one of the men from the photos Elena had just found in the desk, the corrupt one. "We had an anonymous tip about a rat infestation," the inspector said, sneering at Elena. "We don't have rats," Elena said, stepping forward. "We just passed inspection last month." "Things change quickly, Miss Vance," the inspector said. He walked straight into the kitchen. 30 seconds later, there was a shout. "Found one!" The inspector walked out, holding a large, dead rat by the tail. It was dry. It hadn't been living in the kitchen. It had been brought in a pocket. "Shut it down!" the inspector barked. "Immediate closure. Code violation 402. Everyone out!" The customers, already on edge from the news crews outside, scrambled to leave. Brenda was in the corner, smirking. She had unlocked the back door for him. It was a setup, a coordinated demolition of Eleanor's life. As the diner emptied, Rick walked up to the glass window. He didn't come in. He just stood there in the rain, tapped his watch, and smiled. He mouthed 2 words: "Game over." Elena stood in the center of her empty, infested restaurant. The Cinderella story was dead. The headline was already changing. The internet was already turning on her. Gold Digger was trending on Twitter locally. She called Mr. Henderson, Arthur's lawyer. "The number you have reached is not in service," the automated voice said. She tried the emergency line Henderson had given her. Voicemail. She was alone. Arthur was in Zurich, unreachable. The lawyers were gone, and Rick had the police, the health department, and the media in his pocket. She went home to find red paint splashed on her apartment door. Thief. Inside, Toby was crying. "The kids at school saw the news," he sobbed. "They said you drugged the old man. They said we're going to jail." Eleanor held her brother, feeling the walls closing in. Rick didn't just want the diner back. He wanted to destroy her for the humiliation she had caused him. She thought about giving up. She could sell the building, take the cash, and run. Move to another state. Then she remembered the photos in the desk. Rick was confident because he had leverage on everyone. He thought he was the puppet master. But he didn't know Elena had found his strings. She wasn't going to run. She was going to pull them. Elena spent the next 3 days in the dark. She kept the diner closed. She didn't answer the press. She kept Toby home from school. To the world, it looked like she was hiding in shame. In reality, she was studying. She had taken the envelope of photos and the cash ledger to the only person she could trust, a regular customer named Mr. Wu. Mr. Wu was a quiet man who sat in booth 2 every Sunday. He was also a retired forensic accountant for the FBI. Elena had given him free pie for years. Now, she was calling in the favor. "This is explosive, Elena," Mr. Wu said, looking over the documents at her kitchen table. The blinds were drawn. Rick wasn't just bribing local officials. He was laundering money for the Petrovich Syndicate. That's a heavy-duty loan shark operation out of Chicago. This diner was a washing machine for dirty cash. "So if I turn this in, Rick goes to jail?" Elena asked. "If you turn this in, the police might bury it," Wu warned. "You saw the photos. Half the precinct is on Rick's payroll. If you hand this evidence to the wrong cop, it disappears, and you might disappear with it. So what do I do?" "You need to get Rick to admit it," Wu said. "On record, publicly, or to someone the police can't ignore." "How? He won't come near me unless it's to spit on me." "He's greedy, Eleanor," Wu said. "Greedy men make mistakes when they think they've already won. You need to offer him a surrender." Eleanor nodded slowly. A plan began to form. It was dangerous. It required her to walk into a trap and hope she could spring her own first. The next morning, Eleanor called Rick. "I'm done," she said into the phone, pitching her voice to sound broken and hysterical. "You win, Rick. The rats, the news. I can't take it. Toby is scared. I want out." Rick laughed on the other end. It was a wet, ugly sound. "I knew you didn't have the stomach for the big leagues, sweetie. You're a waitress. You're born to serve, not to lead. I just want it to stop," she sobbed. "I'll sign the diner back over to you. I just want to keep the trust fund for Toby. Please." There was a pause. Rick was calculating. "Fine. Meet me at the diner tonight. 10:15 p.m. Alone, bring the deed. And Elena, if I see one cop, I release the video I have of you giving Arthur his medication. It's edited to look very bad." "I'll be alone," she promised. At 9:55 p.m., Elena unlocked the back door of the Silver Fork. The place was dark, lit only by the streetlights filtering through the rain-streaked windows. She sat in booth 4, Arthur's booth. At 10 p.m. exactly, the front door opened. Rick walked in. He wasn't alone. He had 2 of the massive bouncers from a club down the street with him. "Alone, I said," Rick tutted, shaking his head. "I am alone," Elena said, placing the deed on the table. "Who are they?" "Witnesses," Rick grinned, "just to make sure the transaction is smooth." He sat across from her. He looked around the diner like a king, surveying his reclaimed castle. "God, it feels good to be back. I'm going to burn this booth first. Put a statue of myself here." "Just sign the papers, Rick," Elena said, pushing the document forward. "I want to leave." "Not yet," Rick said. He leaned in. "I want to hear you say it. I want you to say, 'I'm a nothing, and you're the boss.'" "I'm a nothing, and you're the boss," Elena recited, deadpan. With feeling, Rick slammed his hand on the table. And admit it. Admit you know about the business. Admit you know about the Petrovich money. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. He had to say it. I don't know what you're talking about, she feigned ignorance. Don't play dumb, Rick snapped at. You found the drawer. Brenda saw you. You know this place washes $100 grand a month for the mob. That's why you have to give it back. You can't handle that kind of heat. Only I can handle the Petrovics. Only I can keep the cops paid off. You're just a little girl. So it's true, Elena asked quietly. You're laundering money? I'm an intricate part of the local economy, Rick sneered. Now give me the pen. Elena didn't reach for the pen. She reached into a pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen was glowing. It was on a call. Did you get that? Elena asked the phone. Rick froze. Who is that? The police? I own the police. A voice came through the speakerphone. It wasn't the police. It was deep, crisp, and terrifyingly familiar. I certainly hope you don't own the FBI, Rick, because that would be very expensive. It was Arthur. Rick's face went white. Arthur? But you're in Zurich. I was in Zurich. Arthur's voice boomed. Now I'm in the van outside. Suddenly the kitchen door swung open. It wasn't the cook. It was a SWAT team. Simultaneously, the front windows of the diner shattered inward as tactical officers poured through the entrance. Federal agents, drop to the ground! Rick scrambled up, knocking the table over. The two bouncers immediately raised their hands, abandoning him. No, no! Rick screamed. She set me up! This is entrapment! Mr. Wu stepped out from the kitchen, wearing a Kevlar vest over his cardigan. He held a recording device. It's not entrapment if you brag about it, Rick. We have you on tape admitting to money laundering, racketeering, and bribery of public officials. Elena sat still in the booth as chaos erupted around her. Red laser sights danced through the fog. Rick was tackled to the ground, his face pressed against the dirty linoleum he had forced her to clean for years. The front door opened again. The crowd of agents parted. Arthur Sterling walked in. He leaned on his cane, looking down at Rick, who was being cuffed. I told you, Rick, Arthur said calmly. You made a mistake. You thought money was power. But the truth is, loyalty is power. And you have none. Arthur looked at Elena. She was shaking, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. Are you all right, my dear? Arthur asked, offering her a handkerchief. I think so, Elena stammered. I thought you were gone. I had to be, Arthur winked. If I was here, Rick would have been too cautious. We needed him to feel safe enough to bite. You were the bait, Elena. And you were magnificent. Elena looked at Rick as he was dragged out, screaming obscenities. She didn't feel fear anymore. She felt a strange, cold clarity. He's gone? She asked. For 20 years minimum, Mr. Wu confirmed, walking over. The Petrovic family won't be happy, but with the evidence you found in that desk, we're taking them down too. Arthur sat down opposite Eleanor. He looked at the overturned table. Well, Arthur said, it seems we have a mess to clean up. Again. I'll get the mop, Elena said instinctively. No, Arthur stopped her, placing a hand on her arm. You're the owner, Elena. You hire someone to get the mop. 6 months had passed since the night the red lights of the SWAT team reflected off the wet pavement of 4th Street. The scandal of Rick's arrest had dominated the local news cycle for weeks. The Diner Don, as the papers called him, was currently serving the first year of a 25-year sentence at Walla Walla State Penitentiary. His plea deal had been rejected, thanks to the overwhelming evidence Elena had secured from the hidden desk drawer. But the real story wasn't about the man who went to prison. It was about the woman who took charge. It was a crisp autumn morning. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the Seattle sky a piercing, hopeful blue. Elena stood outside the Silver Fork. It looked different now. The peeling grey paint was gone, replaced by a warm, inviting brick facade. The flickering neon sign that buzzed like a dying fly had been replaced with a sleek, modern logo. The Silver Fork and Spoon, Outset 1978. She unlocked the front door, the chime ringing clearly. Inside, the smell of stale grease was a memory. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans, fresh sourdough, and lavender sanitizer. The booths had been reupholstered in a soft teal leather. "Morning, boss," Elena smiled. It was Marco, the cook who had walked out on her. She had hired him back, but on her terms. He was paid properly now, offered health insurance, and in exchange, the kitchen was run with military precision and zero attitude. "Morning, Marco. The sourdough delivery is here." "Already in the oven, Elena, and Toby is in the back doing his homework." Elena walked to the back. Toby was sitting at the employee break table, which was now clean and well lit, working on a science project. He wasn't wheezing. His skin had color. The nebulizer sat in his backpack, unused for weeks. "Hey, buddy," she said, kissing the top of his head. "Ready for the lunch rush?" "I'm going to help seat people today," Toby said proudly. "Mr. Henderson said I have executive presence." Elena laughed. "Did he now?" The morning rush began, but it wasn't the chaotic nightmare it used to be under Rick. It was a symphony. The customers were different too. The tech workers from Amazon and the construction workers from down the block sat side by side. But the most important change was Booth 4. Booth 4 was no longer just a table. A small brass plaque was screwed into the wall above it, reserved for A. Sterling. At 9:30 a.m. sharp, the black Escalade pulled up. But there were no bodyguards today. Arthur didn't need them here. This was safe territory. Arthur walked in, looking spry. He wore a camel-colored coat and carried a bouquet of sunflowers. "Good morning, Elena," he beamed. "Arthur?" Elena rushed out from behind the counter to hug him. "You're back from Zurich early." "I couldn't miss the 6-month anniversary," he said, handing her the flowers. He sat in his booth. "Coffee? And perhaps dry wheat toast?" "Actually," Elena grinned, "I've updated the menu. The Arthur special now comes with avocado and a poached egg on artisanal rye. And you're going to eat it because you need the healthy fats." Arthur chuckled. "Bossy. I like it. You remind me of my late wife more every day." As he ate, Arthur watched the diner hum with life. He wiped a crumb from his lip and looked at Elena seriously. "You know, the quarterly reports came in yesterday," Arthur said. "Profits are up 40%. Employee retention is 100%. You aren't just running a charity, Elena. You're running a business better than Rick ever did." "I just treat people like people," Elena shrugged, pouring him a refill. "It's not rocket science. It's just not being a jerk." "It's rare enough to be a superpower," Arthur countered. He reached into his coat pocket. "Speaking of lost things." He pulled out a small velvet box and placed it on the table. Elena froze. Her breath hitched. She recognized the size of the box. She opened it slowly. Inside, resting on the black velvet, was the silver locket. Her mother's locket. The one she had pawned for $200 to buy Toby's medicine months ago. "How?" she whispered, tears instantly filling her eyes. I lost the ticket. It was gone. I had Mr. Wu track down the pawn shop records from the day I saw your neck was bare," Arthur said gently. "I bought it back the next day. I was keeping it for you, waiting until you felt like you had earned it back. But the truth is, you never should have had to lose it." Elena picked up the cool silver metal. She opened it. The tiny photo of her parents was still inside. She held it to her chest and wept, right there in the middle of the lunch rush. Arthur reached across the table and patted her hand. "You saved me, Elena. You saw a man when the world saw a ghost. This is the least I could do." The door chime rang. A young woman walked in, looking exhausted, her clothes worn and wet from the rain. She looked around nervously, clearly unable to afford a meal, just looking for a place to get warm. Elena wiped her eyes. She clasped the locket around her neck, feeling the weight of her history and her future. "Excuse me," the young woman whispered to Elena. I don't have any money. Could I just get a glass of water?" Elena looked at Arthur. Arthur smiled and nodded. Elena turned to the young woman. She didn't use her owner voice. She used the voice that had saved Arthur's life. "Take a seat in booth 2, honey," Elena said warmly. "The water is free, but the soup is on the house today, and it's warm." As the girl sat down, looking at Elena like she was an angel, Elena realized the cycle had broken. The cruelty of the past ended with her. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the guardian of the Silver Fork, and on her watch, no one went hungry in the rain. And that is the story of how one act of kindness toward a homeless stranger brought down a corrupt empire. Rick thought power came from fear and money, but Eleanor proved that true power comes from character. It's a reminder to all of us. Be careful who you step on, because you never know who they might turn out to be. What would you have done if you were in Elena's shoes? Would you have risked your job to feed Arthur, or would you have played it safe? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next story about instant karma served cold. Thanks for watching, and remember, kindness is always a good investment.